Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and, honestly, epic books ever written, the book of the prophet Isaiah. It's this incredible story about a nation in crisis, a pretty severe warning of judgment, and then this radical hope that has literally shaped history. So, let's get right into it.
So, what is the story of Isaiah really all about? Well, you've got this nation that's falling apart, a prophet with a really tough message to deliver, and this vision that just swings wildly from total destruction to unbelievable hope. But to really get what Isaiah is saying, we have to go back in time and see the world through his eyes. So let's set the stage. We're in a world that is absolutely teetering on the edge of collapse. And you've got to remember, this isn't just some abstract theology. This stuff was written right in the middle of massive geopolitical chaos. Isaiah starts his work around 740 BC, and it is a messy time to be alive. The Assyrian Empire is this terrifying military machine just swallowing up nations, including the northern kingdom of Israel. And right behind them, the Babylonians are getting stronger, and they're the ones who will eventually just level Jerusalem. So the kingdom of Judah is basically stuck between these two warring superpowers. But here's the thing. Isaiah's core message was that the armies at the gate weren't the real problem. The true danger, the real sickness, was actually festering inside Judah's own society. The whole nation was rotting from the inside out. And Isaiah wasn't vague about it. He got super specific. He called out the rich and powerful for taking advantage of the most vulnerable people. The widows, the orphans. He pointed to the crushing taxes, the corrupt legal system where you could buy a verdict, and leaders who were totally failing the people they were supposed to be guiding. Society was just breaking down. Now, to explain just how bad things had gotten, Isaiah didn't just rattle off a list of sins. He was way more creative than that. He told a story, a powerful parable that acted like a doctor's diagnosis for the entire nation.
And it starts in this really unexpected way. It sounds like a love song. It's about a man who pours everything he has into creating the perfect vineyard. He does all the right things to make sure he gets a great harvest of grapes. But, as you can probably guess, the song takes a really dark turn.
So after all that love and care, the owner, who represents God, comes to his vineyard, the nation, expecting, good fruit. But instead, all he finds are these worthless, sour grapes. And Isaiah uses this incredible wordplay in Hebrew to make his point. God looked for mishpat, which means justice, but he found mispach, bloodshed. He looked for tzedakah, righteousness, but he heard tzedakah, the cries of people being oppressed. The nation was producing the exact opposite of what it was created for.
So what were these bad grapes exactly? Well, Isaiah spells it out. We're talking about out-of-control greed, where the rich just snapped up all the land, a culture of reckless partying, totally ignoring the bigger picture. People were literally calling evil good and good evil, completely flipping morality on its head. And it all came from this deep-seated pride and a justice system that was for sale. This was the cancer that was killing the nation from within.
Okay, so with a diagnosis like that, the prognosis, well, it's not looking good. It was grim, but it was also inevitable. Isaiah's message had to turn to the consequences of this deep, deep moral failure.
And it's so important we get this right. The way Isaiah talks about judgment, it isn't like God is just having a temper tantrum. It's more like a necessary, radical surgery. It's the painful but totally determined act of a doctor who has to cut out the cancer to have any hope of saving the patient.
The logic here is really direct. The owner of the vineyard basically says, look, what more could I have done for these vines? Since they refused to produce good fruit, he was going to tear down the protective wall around the vineyard. He'd stop taking care of it and just let it be destroyed. So, in the real world, this meant that because the people had abandoned God, God would remove his protection, leaving them totally vulnerable to those empires waiting at their gates.
And this wasn't just some empty threat. It actually happened. A little over a century after Isaiah started preaching, his prophecy came true in the most horrific way you can imagine. In 586 BC, the Babylonians stormed Jerusalem, burned the holy temple to the ground, and dragged the survivors off into exile.
Now, if the story ended there, it would just be an absolute tragedy. But it doesn't. Woven through all of these dire warnings is this other, equally powerful theme. A theme of unshakable, almost illogical hope. And this is the pivot point for the whole book. For Isaiah, destruction is never the end of the story. It's more like a purification, a fire that burns away the disease to make room for something new to grow.
Isaiah gives us two amazing images for this hope. First, he says even after the whole tree of the nation is chopped down, a stump will be left in the ground. That's a faithful remnant of people who will survive. And then, And this is incredible. Out of that dead-looking stump, a new shoot will sprout. This was a mind-blowing image of impossible new life. It was a promise of a future king from the line of David who would finally get it right and bring true justice.
And the kingdom this king is going to bring? It's unlike anything the world has ever seen. It's a world where all those injustices that wrecked Judah are finally fixed, where the poor and the downtrodden are treated with absolute fairness. The change is so profound, so deep, that even nature itself is healed. You get these famous images of predators and prey living together in peace. The entire created order is restored.
But that brings up a deeper question, right? A good king can enforce justice from the outside, but how do you actually cure the human heart? How do you fix the source of all the greed and rebellion in the first place? Well, the second half of Isaiah introduces this mysterious figure who has the answer.
Right around chapter 40, the whole tone of the book just flips. The warnings about destruction are now in the past, and the focus shifts to comfort and salvation for the people who are stuck in exile. And at the very heart of this section is a figure called the Servant of the Lord.
This servant is going to bring about salvation through a pretty shocking and radical idea: substitutionary atonement. The basic concept is that this innocent servant will suffer and die, not for anything he did wrong, but to take on the punishment for the sins of other people. He becomes the ultimate cure for the disease of human evil by absorbing all of its consequences into himself. It's absolutely wild.
So this incredible act by the servant, it blows the doors wide open for Isaiah's final, absolutely breathtaking vision. We're not just talking about restoring a nation anymore. We're talking about renewing everything.
This is the climax. This is the peak of the mountain for Isaiah's entire prophecy. The promise isn't just to patch up the old broken world, it's to create something entirely new. We're talking cosmic-level renewal.
And what does this new creation look like? Well, it's a world where sorrow and crying are gone, replaced by unending joy. It's a world of total security, where people can finally enjoy the work of their hands without fear of it being taken away. And we see that vision one last time: a restored, natural world where the cycle of violence is finally broken, for good.
So at the end of the day, Isaiah's message really forced the people back then to ask themselves a tough question. Where were they putting their ultimate trust? In their military power, in their economy, in their corrupt political systems, or in God? And, that's a question that cuts right through the centuries, and it asks every single one of us the exact same thing. Where do we place our ultimate trust?